Good afternoon. Thank you very much, and it's indeed an honor and privilege to be with you this afternoon here in my hometown. It's been a busy weekend. Didn't get to spend a whole lot of time here in DeSoto. Yesterday, I made a trip down to Austin to give some remarks and talk about our future, which is what I'm going to do here this afternoon. You know, during the past 3 years, our nation has gone through many things. Through a once in a lifetime pandemic. And during that pandemic, we've done a lot of things, but one thing we've done in particular, we have become more polarized. You know, instead of talking about our disagreements, we take to the streets in violence. For us to move forward as a nation, we must come together as a nation. This afternoon, I want to lay out for you my plan to return America to the nation it once was. You know, it's not been all bad news, but in the last 3 years, we have seen progress from record 15.5% unemployment to 3.3% unemployment. We will, under my administration, reform the unemployment system, a system that was taken advantage of during the pandemic. Recently, the Department of Labor announced that there are 1.6 jobs available for every American. Now, sit here and think about it. 1.6 jobs for every person in this room, for every person in the city of DeSoto, for every person in the state of Texas, for every person in the United States of America, there's a job, a little bit over a job and a half available. Why do we have that many jobs available? Under a new system that my administration will roll out called enhanced unemployment, everyone on unemployment will have to have a minimum of 5 interviews a week to qualify for continued benefits. You know, in my life, I've been unfortunately part of many layoffs, job migrations, and that sort of thing, where your job was migrated to other countries, other states. And each time you're out of work. And that's an unfortunate thing. But I'll never forget one of the first times that this happened to me. My wife, Andrea, she said to me, you know, your new job right now is to find a new job. And so my challenge here this afternoon and evening is for every American who's out of work, your new job is to find a new job. And this enhanced unemployment will also require that every able-bodied American will have a job. Now, let me clarify this when I say to say this afternoon tonight. When I say able-bodied American, I'm not talking about our senior citizens. They've earned their retirement. I'm not talking about the stay-at-home parent. They made the arrangements to make that important contribution to their children's future. Who I am talking about, however, is the person who took unemployment during the pandemic and never returned to the workforce. This must change, and under my administration, it will. We must also target the outrageous prices people pay for prescription drugs. Just the other day, someone told me that they had just paid over $700 for a prescription they needed. It wasn't an option. They needed this prescription. $700 for a prescription. Now, that is way too much. That $700 could have went toward rent and necessities for living, not for a prescription drug. How is that fair when Big Pharma is making millions every year? That has to come to a stop, and under my administration, it will come to a stop. There won't be none of this saying we're going to do it and it not happening. It will happen under my administration. When it comes to our nation's borders, we must protect our borders. The United States has always been a nation that welcomes people from throughout the world, but we do that through the proper methods. You just don't walk into the United States or walk through border areas. This last February, I made a trip to El Paso and visited our southernmost border. When I visited the international bridge that connects the United States with Mexico, I saw hundreds of people crossing the bridge and entering the United States the proper way. Not just down the road a few miles, crossing the Rio Grande River, going into people's property and lands, entering the United States the improper way. We must reestablish our borders. And under a Rogers administration, we will reestablish our borders. Turning to the world stage, we must be a protector of democracy. The United States is one of the leading democracies left in the world. As a world leader, we must do what it takes to protect democracy. And there's been a lot of talk about Ukraine and all the money that is being sent to Ukraine. That battle is important. That battle is very important. But we also need to think about our priorities here at home. And we need to find a way to equalize both of those. We must do what we can to protect Ukraine, and we must do everything we can in our country to protect our country as well. And one of the things about protecting our democracy, that starts here at the state level. During the last 3.5 years, we've seen schools shuttered, now reopened. And we've seen an increased polarization in our nation, like I talked about. One of the things yesterday that kind of shocked me on my trip to Austin was I had a chance to talk to a couple of teachers. And there is anger out there. There's anger between educators. It's the future of this country. And we have to end the polarization, the ripping apart of one another, and just do the job of educating our students. To restore our nation to greatness, we must start in our nation's schools. Since the pandemic, our nation's classrooms have become a political battlefield. It's a battlefield where our students will suffer, and they will suffer big losses, and they've already have. You think about the year that we were going through COVID, 2021 timeframe, and you look at the test stats, there was a learning deficit that's still there, and you're seeing it in the classrooms right now. You're seeing the kindergarten and first graders having to get used to being in school and having to get used to learning the necessary stuff. I mean, it's a big change for them because they weren't able to be in a classroom at the very beginning, and so it's something that we had to work on tremendously. Under my administration, we will end the battle and return education to the classrooms. Under my administration, we will teach the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s and the good and bad of our history. By doing this, we can ensure that our next generation does not repeat the same mistakes. And I said this to a student just the other day. He asked me why is it important for us to study history? And my answer quite simply was, you have to study history so you don't repeat the same mistakes that our generation and generations before us have repeated, so that you can do the right things. You can look back and see that didn't work. So we need to do something better. And I talk about teaching the good and bad and ugly. It's not all bad stuff. Yes, I have to admit, the United States we got bad history. We have some bad history. But we have some tremendous successes too. Think about the landing on the moon. Bad things, you think about slavery. You think about the civil rights situation. But if we teach those things in school and don't worry so much about what is politically correct, but basically what needs to be taught. It's just history is history, math is math, Science is science, period. You know, I've had the good fortune to be married to a full time educator, and I do say a full time educator for over 20 years. For over, actually, about 28 years, but 29 of those years, Andrea served in the classrooms as an elementary school teacher. Early on in our marriage, she wanted to teach summer school after teaching a full school year. She said at the time she did it for the extra pay. At the end of the at the end of summer, as the fall term approached and summer school winded down, she was tired, not fully charged, ready to go to take on another 9 months of school. And I will tell you, that 9 months is a grind. It is a grind. So, how do we solve a situation like Andrea's and countless other educators throughout our country? Bottom line is we increase teacher pay. You ask, how are you going to increase teacher pay? You know, the thing is we must pay teachers a livable wage. Too many of our teachers are living on the poverty level. I know a lot of teachers personally, and they're sometimes having to work two jobs when the teaching job takes a majority of their time. A lot of people have a misconception about what an educator does. They think it's 7:45 to 3:15. You got summers off. It's a fantastic life. Yeah, it is a fantastic life. I will tell you that. It's nothing more, there's nothing more rewarding than seeing a student grow. But it is a lot of hours. It's sometimes 80 hours a week. And so the teachers should be paid for that time and paid what they deserved. We must bring this era of poverty for teachers to an end, and under my administration, we will. How are we going to increase teacher pay? The first step is we must return the federal budget to the 2019 spending levels, reduce unnecessary federal programs, then use the difference to fund the increases. Now, there are a lot of unnecessary federal programs. A lot of it was born out of COVID. If we eliminated those programs and used the difference to pay for teacher salary increases, we will see many teachers returning. Those who have left the classroom and went on to other fields return to the classroom, and those who actually one of the proposals I have is that you have let's say you're mid-career, you're 40 or 50 so, and you're looking at a change. You know, that happens. And so what if you want to get in the classroom? Well, here's what we're going to do under my administration. You have a degree. My administration actually will pay for your certification on the state level if you commit to staying in the classroom for up to 2 years. If you stay in the classroom for up to 2 years, my administration will pay for your certification. And that's one of the points we were talking about yesterday down in Austin. They're like, there's too many unqualified teachers in the classroom. Well, let's fix that. Let's fix that. Let's get them certified, and let's get these classrooms filled with certified teachers. You know, we also must restore a true curriculum to the classroom. We must get rid of this so-called woke education and returning to teaching the ABCs, history, the good, the bad, the ugly. And one of the biggest things, I talked about this yesterday down in Austin, we must return a sense of patriotism to our classrooms. One of the things in this very city happened to me when I was in high school. I had a government teacher who was from a different political party. But during my high school years, he never ever tried to instill his party's agenda on his students. He taught you how government works, and he instilled a sense of patriotism and pride in you. My education plan, called Back to Basics, will not only increase teachers' pay to a wage they can live on and at the same time support their students and families, it also will bring patriotism back to the classrooms. You know, one of the things that a school not too far from here, and probably many schools in the area, is they do morning pledges. And they all salute the American flag, they all salute the Texas flag, and there's a moment of silence. That needs to be, if it's not, and it is in a lot of schools. I'm not going to say it's not, but some schools it's not a daily ritual. That needs to be brought back. I will tell you, in my high school days, that government teacher had a profound impact on my life, and probably the reason why I'm at this podium here this afternoon. You know, we owe it to the students in our classrooms to give them the best possible education. We must prepare them for the future. And the only way we can do that is to take the politics out of the classroom. You know, during the pandemic, the politics of what was being taught in our classroom, it became way too political. And I'm going to say this here today. I'm a firm believer in school choice. I'm a firm believer in vouchers. Our parents have the right to put their child in a school of their choice. And if they want to homeschool their child, they have the right to have that money set aside so they can teach their child. You know, back before charter schools, years and years ago, back when I was going to school, you were tied to a certain school, and oftentimes where you moved depended upon not the neighborhood really, but the school district. And so we must make every school an option in this country. Our parents have the right and freedom to place their child in a school where they feel they would be most successful. The next thing we need to work on is we as a nation must once again learn to respect one another. We have turned against each other, oftentimes in violent ways. Families torn apart by senseless gun violence. And I think about it, just a couple months ago, that actually hit fairly close to home. Here, just down the road, there was a shooting at a medical clinic in Cedar Hill, and a senseless act of violence that it could have been handled some other way. But instead of talking about it every time there is a situation, and unfortunately there is one all too often, we come to this podium and we pledge that we're going to do what we can for gun reform, and we talk and talk and talk, but nothing ever happens. Within a few days, it's gone from the headlines and it's history. We must do what it takes to pass gun reform that does not infringe on constitutional rights and increase mental health spending to get help to those who need it. You know, there are many people. The situation in Cedar Hill is one. What if that person had access to mental health care? What if he was able to call and say, hey, I need some help, instead of taking it into its own hands and using a gun? You know, there are many, many people who can use a little extra help. And we owe it not only to our children, we owe it to them as well to give them the best help that they can do. And I think, you know, if we do these steps, I know we actually will have a much better nation. You know, the plan I laid out here this afternoon is just the beginning to what I believe will restore the United States to the nation it once was. You know, in 1984, right off the road in Dallas, I was part of my first political convention. The nominee was Ronald Reagan, and the theme that year was Morning in America. President Reagan had a way of making you proud to be American, to making you patriotic, and making you believe in your country and want to serve your country. I want to do the same. I want to bring that sense of patriotism and pride back to our nation, back to its citizens and back to its classrooms. And I know we can do this. If we all just work together, shake each other's hands, and solve our problems instead of creating others. May God bless you. May God bless our troops. And may God bless the United States of America. Thank you all very much. Thank you.